From the southeastern corner of western North Carolina, this is a politics-free episode of Folklore. I'm your DJ, James Hernician, and this is Slow Runner.
It blows my mind to see the skull of Mary Magdalene when they paraded through that town in southern France. How do we choose the things we think are worth remembering? Don't overthink it, baby. All I know is when you're close to me, it feels so perilous, so wild and free, so mysterious. And the church bells will holler if we jump in the water. Ooh, get what we wanted.
That was the opening of Skull of Mary Magdalene, the third track from Slow Runner's new record, Yesterday Don't Fail Me Now, which was released a few weeks ago. Slow Runner is a band of musicians from this part of the world, but it's more or less a product of one mind, that of Michael Flynn, formerly of Greenville and Charleston, South Carolina, and now very much an integral part of the community that is Saluda, North Carolina. That's his vocals you just heard, the keyboards too. I'm not exaggerating when I say that Michael's approach to catchy melodies and clever lyrics is largely responsible for reigniting my interest in pop music. I've tried hard not to be one of those people who stop caring about new tunes at roughly their 33rd birthday, and while I do still pay attention to the Americana and jazz artists that WNCW likes to play, I have to admit that pop just hasn't done it for me since I was 30-something. Everything pop nowadays just seems to sound more or less the same. So little innovation. Nobody takes the risk anymore. I know, old man complaining about kids these days. But there's actually some solid science out there that shows just how unimaginative and homogenous popular music has become. There's simply less variety, melodically, rhythmically, lyrically, than there used to be. When I first started listening to Michael's work, it was because he had just moved to Saluda, and I was intrigued by the idea that someone who should probably be living in Nashville, Tennessee, had instead decided to bring his family to Polk County. Kind of reminded me of myself. But it didn't take long to get hooked. For me anyway, Michael manages to blend the playfulness of the Beatles with the wit, but not the cynicism, of Ben Folds. And he's doing it in a way that I don't hear from anyone else. It also doesn't hurt that he has a thing for analog synthesizers. Plus, he's written a song that never fails to bring a tear to my eye. I've been bugging him for ages to do an episode of this show so we can talk about that song and a bunch of other stuff. Finally, with the release of Yesterday Don't Fail Me Now, and after things have settled down after Tropical Storm Helene, he agreed. I grabbed my podcasting gear and headed over to his back deck, where we recorded this interview on October 25th. Okay, Michael Flynn, welcome to Folklore.
Thank you for having me.
I don't think most people understand what it takes to be a musician these days, unless they're in the business themselves. So tell me your story of how you ended up doing whatever it is you do, which is a whole bunch of things in the music industry.
Sure. So I grew up with two brothers, and when you hit third grade, you had to take piano lessons. Had to take 2 years of piano when you hit third grade in our family. And my brothers, neither of my brothers went beyond the 2 years. I took a third year. I was kind of enjoying it. I didn't enjoy the focusing on the lesson and stuff, but I loved playing around on the piano and making stuff up And so anyway, then middle school hit, and I had a few buddies who wanted to start a band. And I was like, ooh, I could play keyboards. And that was kind of it. I was lost to respectable society from there out.
And where were you when you were
This was in Greenville. I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina. And so middle school and high school, played in bands, went to college, got an English degree, played in bands around town at College of Charleston. And then Still didn't want to grow up, so went to Berklee College of Music for 2 years, studied songwriting and music stuff up there
That's in Boston.
in Boston. And then coming out of that, I signed a headhunter deal with a guy who said he could get me a record deal. And record deals might not mean what they once did, but back then that was like the brass ring of like legitimacy, was being validated by the music industry in the form of a deal with a large corporation that was going to spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions, on making your music and promoting you. And so that didn't work out, moved back to Charleston, made a record, and then that record started making the rounds in the industry somehow. I still don't understand how. And then I started getting offers for record deals, and signed one with Clive Davis at Sony BMG, who re-released that first record that we had made after moving to Charleston, back to Charleston.
Sorry, so this is with Slow Runner,
Correct.
your first and basically only real group?
Yes, and it was always just me. At this time, it was Michael Flynn. It was Michael Flynn until we signed with Sony, and then they suggested, hey, this is singer-songwriter-y, but it's also weirder than that. And so at this time, there was a lot of name songwriter, John Mayer, those type dudes. And so they thought this doesn't fit with that because it's a little more indie and strange. So it would probably fit better as a band name or alias or something. So went with Slow Runner. And the records were all made by me and chiefly one other guy, Josh Kaler, who I had met at Berklee and still collaborate with.
And where did you fit in the musical pantheon? Like, when I listen to your music, I mean, there's lots of different influences that we can talk about later, but what did you set out? Where did you say, I want to fit in here?
I wanted to make the kind of records that would get used in dramatic, in like WB dramas on TV, like something that you could put your headphones on, walk down the street, and feel like you were in a dramatic thing that was about your emotional inner life. I feel like we made a lot of dorky songs. We were music nerds, so there was a lot of sort of like overthinking everything. So at the end of the day, it was kind of rock, pop music with retro synthesizers all over it, and with lyrics that were at least trying to be about something mildly interesting.
And you said you're referring to writing songs that you could hear on like a teen drama or something on television.
Right.
You're still doing that kind of thing, aren't you? A little bit?
Yes. So as it worked out, between this record deal and then another 2 publishing deals, which a publisher in the music industry is mainly someone who takes your songs and connects them with music supervisors in film and TV and commercials and other artists who might want to cover it, stuff like that. They kind of exploit your song catalog. And so between the label and these other these other publishing deals, I've gotten a bunch of songs and a bunch of TV shows and commercials and movies. And yes, I've eked out a middle-class existence nearly on that alone, because the rest of the income sources of the music industry are brutally insufficient especially to support a family.
Well, we'll get around to talking about the economics of music, because it is actually quite fascinating. I don't think most people understand exactly how it works these days, even for the biggest artists in the world. But for people around here, they know you as someone who shows up at the Purple Onion or up at the Grey Eagle in Asheville and plays either with yourself or with a group of regulars. You're writing songs about your life now.
Mostly.
Right? And I mean, when I listen or I look at your lyrics, they're very personal.
Sure.
A lot of times. And so let's talk about how the place you're living now is influencing you. But first, why are you here? Because if I'm I'm thinking about even myself, if I wanted to become a big-time science journalist, I would not live here. I would live in New York or Toronto or London or somewhere where you're close to the scientists.
Right.
So you're in Charleston. You could have moved to Nashville or
Yeah.
L.A. or New York. You chose Polk County. Why?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a bit of a story, but ultimately we got tired of dodging hurricanes in Charleston, which is where we'd spent most of our adult lives, my wife and I. And the real estate market was crazy. We kind of just, on a lark, put our house on the market, and then somebody bought it, and we were like, oh no, now we have to move. So we did go and live in Nashville for a week. And I was making a record and recording a string quartet that week in Nashville at a studio, and that was sort of the trial run. And it was not. I couldn't talk my wife into moving there, and I wasn't super into it. I mean, I knew what I would do if I lived there, and whereas moving somewhere like here, I didn't know what I would necessarily do. But we're both just small town kind of people, and I'm generally the ratio of trees to humans, needs to be like 80% trees for me, or else I feel, if I go to New York, I can't be there more than 48 hours or I'm clawing at the walls. I only like humans up to a certain point. And so we basically put all our stuff in storage and kind of just set up shop at my in-laws' lake house in Anderson, and then took day trips to little towns in western North Carolina, because we knew that was, my wife and I, all of our families mostly in Greenville still. So we wanted to be close, but not in Greenville, because we grew up there and, kind of allergic to it now. So we visited a bunch of small towns and found that with Saluda, it was not just gym mines and art galleries. Not that there's anything wrong with those. It was like a functional small town. There's a hardware store. There's a general store. There's a library. And I don't know. Part of it was luck of finding this house, because we had been looking for over a year in Saluda. There was never more than like 2 or 3 houses on the market at any one time that we could afford. And then we ended up getting this place and decided to just go for it. And I mean, it'd be really tough to imagine ever leaving at this point, because we've thoroughly enjoyed living here. From a music perspective, it's not the center of the business, for sure. It is, however, a decent location. Being in Charleston, your touring radius is only half, because half is ocean, and you can't go that way. Here, out-of-town shows are a little more possible, because I can go in more directions. I'm closer to Nashville, and the whole western North Carolina scene is just kind of lousy with singer-songwriters. They're everywhere, and they're really good. And so have found it extremely inspiring, both to just be in a new place, in a place that is like so easily romanticizable because it's so beautiful. And I've found I've made incredible friends, and it's just a beautiful existence here, and it's calm and quiet and all the things that we kind of prefer in our home lives. I kind of love living a place where all the stuff is somewhere else, and I go there to access the stuff, be it shows or appliance stores or whatever it is. I go elsewhere for that, and then I come home and to the tranquility of a simple small town existence. And so between being in striking distance of Asheville and Nashville and other towns, and just the ubiquity of high-speed internet, that's enough to justify it in my book, and it's been fine. It's been great.
How long have you been here?
Since 2018.
Okay, and a couple of years ago, you wrote a song that has become Saluda's anthem, called Saluda.
Right.
We'll just play a little bit of it right now.
Okay.
The steps to the school door, the steepest of miles. For a girl who weighs less than her backpack, before the door closes, she turns back and smiles. So it looks like I'm sticking around for a while. Saluda, Saluda. Moved in when I barely knew ya. Now I'm carving a crooked line through ya and casting my fate to your wind. Saluda, Saluda. Trains may no longer run through ya. Something bigger delivered me to ya. But it's all the same thing in the end. 'Cause I'm carved.
So anybody who has spent any time in Saluda, anyone who lives here, is going to recognize so many of those lyrics.
Right.
And, you know, the other night you were playing at the Purple Onion with Slow Runner,
Right.
and you played that song as you pretty much have to every time you play.
It's true.
And actually, the night before, across the street in the park, a bluegrass band was playing, and when they left, they played a recording of Saluda
Right.
as people walked out. So that song is, I mean, whether you like it or not, people have really adopted it. What's it like to do that? I mean, you're here for like 5 years, not even, and you write a song that just hits all the buttons.
Right.
It's easily the most popular song in Saluda because it's about us.
Right. Right.
Have you had any other experience like that?
Never. I mean, I've always shied away from writing like place songs where a song is sort of a tribute to a place, because that always felt so, I don't know, just like a cheesy move. But then I moved here, and I was genuinely inspired by it. And it's about Saluda. It's also about my life more. It's more about my life in Saluda and sort of the point in our lives where, you know, we had a daughter in elementary school when I wrote it, and was just so in love with the fact that we lived down the street from her school and could walk there, and it's just a charming town that kind of deserves it deserves a song. And you know, monetarily, I kind of it's not exactly, you know, it's not going to be a cash cow for me the way New York might have been had I moved, you know, somewhere with a bigger economic footprint. But it was kind of just a genuine, sweet thing where I was writing ultimately about how much I loved my life. And it just happens to be happening in Saluda. And so I used a lot of town details because it is a sweet, sweet town. Like, you go sit up on the top of the hill and look down on Main Street, and it's just like a Norman Rockwell painting come to life, and you see the same people. And this is our first experience living in a small place. And there are downsides to, you know, in a small town, everyone is equally famous. Everyone knows the ins and outs of each other's lives, because you just do. There are sometimes downsides to that kind of existence, but I've found in times of crisis or in times of happiness even, feeling like it's so much easier to feel like you're a part of a tight-knit community of people in a small place.
There's one lyric, though, that I find curious, and it's like in the chorus, you say, "I'm tracing a crooked line through you."
Carving a crooked
line through. What exactly is that implying?
I just meant I'm forging my life in this environment one day at a time. You know, I'm with each sort of friendship or decision that involves anything outside of my front door, I'm creating my life here.
Okay. I mean, it's a great little line, but I was just curious whether it had any sort of deeper meaning, because I think a lot of your songs do have really personal, intense, emotional content to them. And I don't we don't have to go into what the inspiration for some of these more deeper songs are, but I'm curious, when you write a song that's inspired by something that's happened in your life, some emotional experience, does that inform the whole song, or is it really just a spark and then you go off whatever direction you think the music takes?
Honestly, it's often the exact opposite of that, where, I've come to realize that, for me at least, and probably universally, 100% of songwriting is autobiographical. And I was an English major. I fancied myself someone able to conjure details and tell stories that have nothing to do with my actual existence, Stephen King doesn't live in a world of horror. But over and over again, I would write a song that I thought wasn't about something in my life, and then in hindsight look at it and be like, that was totally about X. And so much of trying not to write about X directly is insecurity. It's being afraid that it won't be interesting, or that it in some way makes me look less cool or whatever. And so a lot of my maturing as a songwriter has been just, I don't want to write diary entry songs that are just like, here's what my emotions are today, and there's just all these pronouns, and it's all this personal stuff that doesn't have any universal benefit. But I feel like I'll often start with like something that emotionally resonates with me, and then as I'm writing it, halfway through I realize, oh, this is really about X, or I could make this about X, and then mine that vein creatively, and that ends up being a better song. I just wrote one that I started out writing it where I thought it was kind of about me, but ultimately I ended up getting farther with it by shifting it to being from the perspective of my 12-year-old daughter, sort of. I mean, I'm picturing myself in with middle school hopes and dreams and fears, and then writing, and just sort of getting as deep into that world emotionally as I can and writing it. And it was like just writing the song was like therapeutic and emotional. And so that's kind of how a lot of them end up, where I don't start off with any kind of agenda about wanting to express something about my personal life, my personal feelings. I start off with an idea for a song, and then I think about, why did that pop into my head, and how does that relate to me in a way that makes it an interesting song to me? And then as I go down that road fleshing it out, it gets personal. But like I said, even when I try not to make it personal, I still end up doing it because I am only myself.
You're like the accidental therapist.
A little bit.
We could also say, if people listen closely to the music, they really are getting a window into your angst and
sure
and self-discovery.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Because I don't think all songwriters or all musicians do that.
Right. And I'm often annoyed by the ones who make it too personal, because then it's not a universal thing. It's like, well, we have to know who so-and-so was dating at the time she wrote that thing, because that's what gives it resonance. And so I try to be, like on this new record, a lot of the songs, all the songs I wrote during this really difficult period in my life between when my dad was diagnosed with cancer and when he died, but only a few of them are explicitly about that, and a lot of them are just about hoping with long odds that something good might happen, or fearing what's to come, or living in the moment because it's so very intensely clear how the carpe diem feeling hits when the backdrop is the end of someone's life or whatever.
Okay, well, let's switch gears a little bit then. You, just a couple minutes ago, you referenced a singer who likes to sing about her exes. So let's talk about Taylor Swift.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, she basically took control back of her own music by re-recording some albums because she no longer had control over Well, basically the economics of the music she'd produced, right?
Right.
And you did something similar with one of the Slow Runner albums.
I did. So that first Slow Runner record that we made that got picked up by Sony, they still own that. And so...
Okay, this is why I want to talk about this. What
Right.
does it mean they own it? Like, you still get money from when a copy is sold, don't you?
No,
No?
I don't. Because my record deal is unrecouped, which is that they invested a healthy chunk of change into
You.
the Slow Runner business,
Yeah.
and they re-released this record that we had made, and there was no, I mean, they would have had to have, it would have had to sell a lot more copies for them to make that money back. So there's a lot of music that is sort of trapped in contract hell, or whatever you want to, however you want to put it. Taylor Swift's is different. It was more that, you know, those records were all available. She just thought it was unfair that this record deal she had signed when she was a teenager was now, allowing others to earn a disproportionate amount of income off of her success. So with ours, they literally are just sitting on the record. It's not, ever since it went from purchasing MP3s to streaming, they never put it on the streaming things. And, when I reached out about the record, they wanted me to basically pay them a bunch of money so that they're, could break even on their investment, and then I could have it back. But obviously I don't have that amount of money. So luckily we realized we could do exactly what she did. And so we re-recorded it, because they don't own the songs. They own the sound recording. And so we re-recorded the record almost note for note. We made a few changes because, that was like 20 years ago, and we're much better at making records now. Me and Josh Kaler and a few other friends who had played on the original played on this one. And so it was kind of the easiest thing to just make a Kickstarter to see if people wanted us to do it, and it funded itself in 24 hours, and off we went.
Can I ask, how much did it cost to do that?
Well, it cost... the Kickstarter raised 14 or 15 grand or so, and it cost less than that, a little less than that, but right in that neighborhood.
And
Once we printed the vinyl and everything.
Several days in the studio?
Oh yeah, we spent 3 or 4 days in the studio together, and then remotely, me in my home studio and him in the studio in Nashville, banging it out. And I tell you, so we toured that record relentlessly. Like, I play all of those songs, we played hundreds and hundreds of times. So maybe in a way, the easiest thing in the world is to go record a bunch of songs that you've played so many times that it's just a lot easier to pull them off in the studio now. And the arrangements you already know, you've lived with these songs for so long. So it wasn't like the normal process of creative decision making. Oh, what do we do? How do we arrange this? We knew, it was real clear what we wanted to do. The only difficult part, honestly, was keeping up with the energy level of 20-something Michael, who was trying really, really hard, who really wanted it to be successful and good. And as you get older, like some of that fire in your belly dims, but also you make, more mature creative choices about how you sing a song or whatever. And so I had to really kind of pump myself up to hit some of those notes and try to match the energy level of the original, because it's different than the kind of music that I generally make nowadays. But all in all, it was kind of fun. It was like almost like going to prom again 20 years later, and you're just a much more well put together human being at a later point in your life than you were when you were in high school.
What's the name of the album?
It's called No Disassemble. And so it was always missing. People would constantly message me, "Why isn't this on Spotify?" And it was the one missing album from our catalog, and it was a popular one because of all the stuff that had happened with the record deal and everything. So it was very poorly recorded, because when we made it, it was on cracked software that I had bartered for in the Berkeley dorms on a Dell computer, like rudimentary home recording setup from the early aughts, and operated by kids who just had no idea what they were doing and who are now professionals at it. So part of what made us eager to do it was we knew that the bar to make something that sounded better was extremely low, and we could easily best it, and I think we did.
You're happy with the product?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm curious as to why more artists don't do this, because you constantly hear about how terrible the deals were for musicians when they were starting out. The record companies took them for a ride. I remember I listened to Bruce Springsteen's memoir, and he was basically broke until Born in the USA.
Right.
Like Born to Run, he made nothing off of that because he signed like a 3-record deal with some guys who just took him for a ride.
Yep.
So Taylor Swift finally came along and said, well, I'm just going to re-record my albums.
Right.
And then you said, well, duh.
Yeah. There's so many people. We have a lot of contemporaries of that era who have done the same thing. And part of it is certain deals. Our deal was structured in a way where we could do that because we did not, it wasn't an all-encompassing deal that counted both the sound recording and the publishing. It was just the record that we had already made completely on our own, and they just re-released. So legally, it was easy for us to do it that way. But some deals, like people sign where they're okay, we'll pay for these records, but we want to own a piece of the publishing too, or they want they give away a level of control that precludes being able to do something like that. So that might be. A lot of cases, that's the issue.
I want to take advantage of you being here to explain a little bit more about the economics of the industry now, because streaming pays so little.
Yes.
And people don't understand when they listen to one song, you're getting what, like a tenth of a cent or something?
I'm getting 0.004 cents per stream.
Okay, it's really bad.
It's real bad.
So if you do the math, you have to have millions upon millions of streams in order to be making any kind of consequential money. And as I understand it, even Taylor Swift really doesn't make a decent living off of her streaming, which is why she has gone to touring, where she, all due respect to Taylor Swift, but she is charging an awful lot of money for her shows because she can.
Right.
And is there any possibility of that ever changing, you think, now that streaming has become what people expect?
It's difficult to imagine. And the value, recorded music has been so devalued both by the democratizing of music creation,
which you take advantage of.
Which I absolutely take advantage of, and which the beginnings of were how we made that first record. So it's there are two sides to it, but generally, the streaming, at this point, people just expect to be able to listen to anything they want for a minimal amount of money. And I don't know how you put that genie back in the bottle. The real problem is that if you're a legacy act that can tour arenas or if you are able to reach that level of escape velocity where you can tour on a large scale like that.
Because you've got a library of songs.
Because you've got a library of songs or name recognition that is a difficult thing to create in today's media ecosystem. Then yes, touring is very lucrative. For an unknown artist, touring is no more lucrative than it was in the 90s or whatever. Like, bands are underpaid now compared to, they make about the same amount for a show that they made 20, 30 years ago because venues have been squeezed. The venues that book, smaller venues, they've been squeezed rent and costs and insurance and everything. And so, so many of my friends, we joke that we are apparel salesmen who play music on the side because being able to sell a few records and T-shirts at a show is the difference between staying in a hotel or sleeping in your car. And you're not. Once upon a time, you could use iTunes money to make up for that loss because the recorded music used to be the product, and the touring was just promoting the product.
Now it's backwards.
And now it's backwards, where you constantly have to be releasing new music just to make sure people don't forget you exist. And then you're depending on the touring to make up the bulk of your income. But obviously, like, there are so many scenarios where that doesn't work, whether you're a small or mid-level artist, or you just, in my case, I have a family yes, if I were gone all the time, maybe I could support us touring, but that would require sacrificing in other aspects of life that are, incongruent with
Why you moved
decent
here.
home life of why I lived here. So it's and so that's why so many musicians and songwriters, the cheat code is being able to, having a decent home studio allows me to do freelance audio things. I do music for short films and movies, and I did the music for Poppy Popcorn. They asked me to do some music for one of their online ads and just random kind of work for hire. I did music for video games for a long time, stuff like that, where there's overlap in the skill set, that it does use up your creative energy and take up your time as far as being able to focus on your career as a performer or whatever. But a lot of those little areas are safer sources of income than booking a 6-week tour and praying gas doesn't go up during it, or there's a lot of ways that the economic model for a musician starting today, or just someone who is not ubiquitously famous, is really, really difficult.
Well, clearly you have been making it work to an extent, because you've just put out a new album, Yesterday, Don't Fail Me Now.
Right.
What does that mean?
Well, this is the record that I wrote kind of at my dad's bedside, and so it is steeped in nostalgia. And so partially it's about sort of the hindsight of looking, considering a life in its totality, looking backwards and sort of seeing the present through that lens. And it's also, I use a lot of vintage synths. I'm a child of the 80s, and that was when I fell in love with music. And so those sounds are those are my comfort. That's my safe space. And you can do them well in a home studio like mine. So it's a bit of that too. It's that because there's a lot of 80s synth stuff on the record, and just sort of, so it's a lot of thinking about the past and mingling it with the present.
Yeah, I was going to say you've managed to sneak in a little bit of bluegrass musicianship onto that album.
Sure.
I mean, drawing on locals.
Yes.
Right? And I mean, I don't know how many people marry vintage synths with banjo.
Right. It's an odd combination that I would not have considered, but it was purely based on the fact that, of who you move here, and obviously, like, the banjo players grow in trees here. Feels like I've never been around as many banjo players per capita, and I got to be real good friends with a girl named Hannah Singh, who plays violin and lives here in Saluda, plays violin and banjo incredibly well, and is just a really, really smart musician. And so it's kind of one of those things where, like, how could I not involve, I have access to this incredible musician here, and it just, that becomes, I write with musicians in mind a lot of the times, and so I started, a lot of the things that I've written since I moved here have been imagining the contributions of people like her and other musicians that I'm friends with. And so besides just the general, exposure to a lot of roots and old-timey and stuff that, you do not hear as much in Charleston or Boston.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up. But let's leave the audience with one of the songs from that new album. And which one do you think best encapsulates that synthesis of synthesizers and old time?
I think maybe Die Running
Yeah.
would be a one. It's very, there's a lot of, like I said, Hannah played banjo and violin on it. There's there's upright bass played with a bow, and a lot of organic elements mixed with synth stuff and atmospheric. Feels like we're kind of in outer space a little bit there.
I'm really glad you chose that one because it's one. I think it's the best song on the album.
Oh, cool.
All right.
Thanks.
So we'll just play the first 30 seconds or so of that. If you want to hear the rest, folks, you're going to have to figure out how to find his music on the streaming platforms or actually go. You've got a website, right?
Sure, slowrunner.net. And it's just if you search for Slow Runner on Spotify or wherever you listen to music, it'll pop up.
All right. Thanks much for your time.
Thanks, James.
The heart forgets. The hardest hits. The arguments. The years that last forever. The days come.